I believe there's a motion on the table.
Okay, I move that pursuant to section 2.2-3711A of the Code of Virginia 1950 as amended, subsection 1, the council hold a closed meeting for the purpose of 1, a discussion, consideration, or interview of prospective candidates for employment, assignment, appointment, promotion, performance, demotion, salary, disciplining, or resignation of specific public officer, appointees, or employees of any public body, the subject for which are discussion or consideration of prospective candidates for appointment to boards, commissions, and members thereof, and discussion of prospective candidates for the city manager position.
So moved.
Moved and seconded. Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Bethany,
4.
Councilman Ely,
4.
Councilman Harris,
4.
Mayor Jones,
4.
Councilman Long,
4.
Councilwoman Woodbury.
4.
Motion carried, 6-0.
Thank you.
Here we go.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, members of City Council. Our first item this afternoon is a presentation of the annual comprehensive financial report. And so I want to start out my comments by saying City Council often hears from Lisa Cipriano, who's our Director of Budget and Evaluation, regarding operating and capital budgets. And these budgets set forth the city's spending plan. Once the fiscal year is closed, the Finance Department prepares the annual comprehensive financial report, otherwise known as the ACFR, which reflects the financial activity of the fiscal year. So at this time, I would really like to extend my sincere appreciation to Susan and her team for all of the hard work and support that they have provided for the auditing process this year. And I would like to ask Susan to come forward. She is, again, our Director of Finance, to present the annual comprehensive financial report. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Manager. Good afternoon, Mayor and members of Council. I'm happy to be here today, not just because it's the holiday season, but this is my favorite time of year because we are finished this process. The Code of Virginia requires that localities produce an annual comprehensive financial report and to have all of their records and accounts audited annually as of June 30th by an independent certified public accountant. The code also requires that the auditor present the results of the audit to the governing board before December 15th each year. The audit process is extensive. It takes several months to complete, and we start the process in April with planning, and then we have audit field work from May all the way through November. The auditors review almost everything: revenue, accounts receivable, cash, investments, payroll, other expenditures, our debt, and other liabilities. In addition, the city receives significant state and federal funding, and so that requires a whole other set of testing that's required to make sure that we're in compliance with those requirements. You'll hear more from Sherry Becker today about the audit process, but that's why, even though the fiscal year has ended in June, we're just now talking about it in December, as it is a lengthy process. The Finance Department prepares about a roughly 200-page annual comprehensive financial report that is audited during the audit process. The preparation of that document is, sorry, I'm hitting something. The preparation of that document is required by state code, and we submit it to the state annually. And like the audit process, it's an extensive report of the city's financial position. It includes financial statements of all the city's funds. We include waterworks, of course, the city's component units. It includes comparisons of budget to actual, disclosures related to capital assets, debt, pension obligations, and we have a section in there on statistical information as well. This is the primary document that is used by our rating agencies to determine the city's financial position when we are going out for credit assessments. The ACFR is also transmitted to the Virginia Auditor of Public Accounts, as they are required to present all of the locality's financial information for use by legislative bodies. This year's ACFR will be posted on the city website following the presentation at this meeting, and we will have copies available in January. It's a big one for those that want that. As it is such a large document, it's a lot to get through. In 2021, we kind of recognized that it's not the most user-friendly document in the world to read. There's like 5 people that like to read it, and they're sitting right here. So we created what is called the Popular Annual Financial Report. It's a companion document. It's unaudited, but it's a summarized version of the big report. We produced it again this year. In our first year in 2021, when we produced the report, we received the National Government Finance Officers Award for Excellence in Financial Reporting. We received it again last year, and we will be submitting it this year. The report is in front of you. Again, that's not what the auditor's here to talk to you about, but it is our citizen-friendly piece, and so I did want you to see it. I'm really excited about this year's PAFR. It really does a good job of telling our story and telling the citizens about the services that the city provides. We will be submitting it, I think I've already said this, to GFOA again this year. We fully expect to receive the certificate in excellence for financial reporting for the 2023 report. Both of these reports, the ACFR and the PAFR, are a result of the hard work of a lot of city staff and departments. I'd like to especially thank the accounting division and finance, and specifically call out Virginia Lovell, our assistant director, and Kelsey Tice, our accounting manager, who are here today, and they lead these efforts for the department. At this time, I'd like to introduce Malab Seth, partner with the independent audit firm of Cherry Becker, to go over the results of the audit.
Thank you, Susan, and good afternoon, honorable members of the City Council. My name is Malav Sheth. I'm the lead partner for the city's ACFR, just like Susan said, but also the component units, which are school board, EDA, and the airport authority. So the ACFR includes the numbers for all those components, including the city. It includes everything that the city does, including the fire department, the police department, the waterworks department. So it's a very comprehensive document that talks about all numbers and what happened during the year. And with the ACFR also, there is MD&A, which is management discussion about how the year went. So those 5-7 pages are crucial if somebody looks at the ACFR and does not understand, I don't know if the sound is coming or not, but understand the numbers behind it. That MD&A gives a lot more information. So what I have here in front of me is the agenda for the meeting. Basically, it goes into the detail of various things that we look at during the audit, but also kind of gives you the results of the audit. Like Susan said, the financial statements are management's responsibility. It's the city's responsibility. What our responsibility as auditors is to come, look at the numbers, do the testing, and results is our opinion. The 3 pages that go in the front of the ACFR is our opinion that basically says what the numbers are and if they are materially misstated or they're reasonably stated in the numbers that the city provides us. So here we have the client service team. As you can see in the chart, the City Council sits top on it. We report to the City Council. We work with management as part of our audit, but our responsibility lies with the City Council and the members of the City Council. So any issues, any findings that are there, we have to report under the guidance to the City Council. That's my team that worked hard. As Susan said, it's a labor of love. It takes time to audit the financial statements, the numbers. There are millions of transactions flowing through, so I commend Susan and her team, but also my team. It takes a long time. We ask a lot of questions. I understand the finance department has a day job, and we kind of come in and disrupt that day job, ask so many questions, and I appreciate the management's responsiveness in getting us to this stage. So this slide is probably the most prominent slide of everything. It's kind of the results of the 4 months, 7 months that Susan talked about that we asked questions of. So the first part is the audited statements received an unmodified opinion. So an unmodified opinion is the highest level of assurance auditor can give on any financial statements that they are reasonable and they are not materially misstated. It's a reasonable, it's not an absolute assurance. The reason why it's not an absolute assurance is because we don't test each and every transaction that happens during the year. We test it on a sample basis, and from that sample, we decipher if the numbers are materially misstated. That's not to say we do not test all the material balances. We look through all material balances. We get the supporting documentation for it. We test the controls to understand if the controls are working properly, and then come to the conclusion if the financial statements that management prepared are reasonably stated and they're not materially misstated. Also, with the financial statements, we are required to audit under the government auditing standards that we call, in accounting legalese, we call it a yellow book report. That's required at any time when you have federal awards that you spend. We have to audit under the yellow book standards. There were no compliance issues found with the yellow book standards also, so that's again a second check mark that the reports are clean. There are no compliance issues with any grants or legal terms there within. The city receives a lot of federal funding and expended about $68 million of those federal funding. That requires a single audit, which is under the uniform guidance. So as part of that, we test certain programs based on the calculation that the uniform guidance lays out for us. Tested 4 major programs this year. One of the major programs, the Medicaid program, did receive a qualified opinion because of finding that we found. There was one finding that we found related to eligibility in that program. The other 3 programs were clean, so they received a qualified opinion. So the Medicaid program, the finding has been recurring. It's been there for 2-3 years now, but the city is working diligently to remove those findings. So last year there were 3 instances of those areas of concern. This year it's down to 1. So hopefully next year when we come and audit this program, it would be 0, and then all 4 programs would get a unqualified opinion. Also, just like Susan mentioned, the city also is required to report compliance requirements under the auditor, Virginia auditor's report. There are certain compliance requirements that are needed there, including the agreed upon procedures. One of the compliance requirement, as you can see in the last bullet point, had exception. The compliance requirement requires to be terminated employees need to be removed from the system within 3 days. In this particular instance, it took more than 3 days for that employee to be terminated. So that was exception. It's not an exception for the financial reporting. It's more compliance on the auditor's, auditor of public accounts. That's a requirement for them. Just briefly touching about internal control. As part of the audit, we look at the internal control of the city to ensure that what procedures we are doing are comprehensive for any financial statement errors. It is not to opine on the effectiveness of internal control. We do look at the internal controls, but if there are any items that we note that they're lacking, we would bring them to management attention, and if they're significant or material enough, we would bring them to the attention of the city council too. So the next page goes into the definition of what a material weakness would be or a significant deficiency if you would identify that, that item. And as you can see, we did not identify any controls that we deemed to be a material weakness. So again, that's again a knock on Susan and her team that worked diligently, and the other departments in the city that worked diligently to the numbers that we get. The audited numbers are the same. So we didn't find any of those issues with the ACFR in there. This slide talks about if there are any corrected or uncorrected misstatements. A corrected misstatement would be the numbers that the city provides us at the start of the audit, and if we found adjustments to those numbers. We did not find any corrected misstatements. And again, with millions of transactions happening, it's always possible that some of those might be missed or coded incorrectly. We did not identify any through our testing. We, however, identified one uncorrected misstatement, which is noted here. It's more of a timing issue than anything else. There's a $5.5 million debt payment that's due July 1st every year. For timing purposes, the city pays that just before the year end, which would be June 28th or 29th. The accounting of that, the way it should work, it should reduce the debt liability on the books. How the city recorded it was recorded as a prepaid asset and not reduce the liability. So it's at the end of it, it is just a gross up of the assets and the liabilities. There is no change in any of the numbers subsequent to that. There's no change in the net position, or in layman's term, there's no change in the net income for the city. It's just a transaction. Come July 1st, it will be corrected by itself once the payments are applied to the debt. So that was the only miscorrected statement we found in the ACFR. The next 4 slides go a little bit into the detail of what the ACFR makes up. There are some things that are numbers, but then there are some things that make up in the policies that make up the numbers. So the significant accounting policies is one of the cornerstones of how the financial numbers come about. There was one change in the significant accounting policies related to the new GASB pronouncement which is GASB number 96. So last year, there was a new pronouncement, 87, related to leases that required all your future leases to be put on the balance sheet as an asset and as liability. Same thing, same concept for any subscription-related, IT-related commitments that were there for next 5 years, 10 years. Those now go on the books as an asset and a liability in there. So basically the same concept, and there were significant changes to that because of that. And as a result of that, there was subscription asset put on the books, about 10 million, and the subsequent liability about 8 million for that. Related parties. So during the audit, we look at all the related party transactions that happen during the year with the city, which would mean any transactions that happen with the school system, EDA, or PAC, or if there are other ones that need to be disclosed in the financial statements. During the audit, we did not find any undisclosed related party transactions. The related party transactions that were there were properly accounted for, and they are properly disclosed in the footnotes of the financial statements also. City did not have any unusual significant transactions. So any unusual would be anything out of the ordinary as part of the city's business. We did not identify any unusual outside the normal course of business. Any other significant transactions were recorded properly in accordance to GAAP and in accordance to the city's policies and procedures. This is accounting estimates is a very integral part of the financial statement process because it's based on management's judgments. Management judgment comes from historical data and also forward-looking in some aspects. Any change in these accounting estimates does have a greater impact on the financial statements. For example, a discount rate on a pension liability, a change in a pension liability discount rate would sway the liability millions of dollars. So when we look at financial statements and look at these accounting estimates, we want to make sure as auditors that they are reasonable and they are within the scope of what we would expect. And Cherry Beckett looks at a lot of financial statements. We have a lot of government clients. So we also look at, compared to other governmental clients, and ensure that they are reasonable throughout the board. Because any change into those sensitive accounting estimates does have a bigger impact on the financial statements. But we did not find any of those accounting estimates to be unreasonable, and they were in line with how we would expect them to be. And finally, we want to make sure when we get the ACFR, the footnote disclosures are accurate. Of course, they're consistent. There's no change year to year except for the new accounting standards that happen. When we look at the footnotes and the disclosures within the ACFR, we tend to look at all of that, and we did not find any that were inconsistent or not clear. So if you look through the financial statement, the ACFR, Susan said it's almost 250 pages. Almost, I would say 75, 80 pages of those are disclosures to the numbers that gives readers more information of what those numbers are for. And majority of them are related to pension and OPEB liabilities and assets that are there on the books. But we did not see any inconsistent or non-clear financial statement disclosures. As part of being an auditor, we need to be independent of the city and all the components. So we have to be independent in fact and in appearance. So anytime we provide any non-attest services, anything other than auditing services, we need to be making sure that we are independent of those services. In the city's case, we are providing one non-attest services, which would be the data collection form. It's basically a requirement for federal, if anytime the city has federal awards, they need to submit a data collection form to the federal agencies. We will prepare that data collection form and sign it once management approves it, reviews it. That should happen in the next couple of weeks now that the ACFR is completed. Other than that, we're not aware of any independence issues that we come across. We look at independence at the start of the audit, during the audit, end of the audit, and even after the audit is completed. we need to make sure that we are independent and we have those checks and balances within Cherry Beckett to ensure that we are independent of the city. The next two slides are just our other required communications. So if we had any difficulties working with management, or if there were any issues that we found in terms of this is not the right way to account for it, or those kinds of discussion, we would bring that to the forefront to the council. We did not have any difficulties during the audit, did not have any disagreements. Of course, as part of the audit, we do talk during the year, as during the audit also, about various transactions, the accounting of those transactions, but there were no disagreements there with there. We did not go outside of our audit team for any consultation. And as far as I know, management did not go out and ask for a second opinion on any of the items that we noted during the audit also. And then as of the issue of the ACFR on Friday, we are not aware of any illegal activities or fraud that we are aware of that came to our attention as part of the audit and based on the inquiries by the management. And then the final piece is the going concern. The guidance requires, the standards requirement is the city should be a going concern at least 12 months after the issue of the reporting. So 12 months from December 8th would be, we have to make sure that the city is not a going concern at that point in time. So we look at the numbers, we look at the debt that's on the city's books, are they able to make those debt payments forward-looking, and making sure how strong the financial position is for the city to sustain itself for the next 12 months. And we didn't note any going concern issues there, and management agrees with that also. So the ACFR is 200 pages. There are supplementary information that goes along with the numbers in the financial statements. Those items are not, they are unaudited. We do look at the numbers that are there in the supplementary information. That supplementary information is tied back to the basic financials. We don't render an opinion on that supplementary information, the required supplementary, but they come along as the GFOA makes it mandatory as part of their plan to make sure that when a reader looks at those financial statements, those supplementary information provide more information to the reader for that purpose. And then the statistical information and the introductory section, those are also unaudited. We don't render an opinion on it, but they provide more information and context to the financial reader what exactly the information pertains in the basic financial statements. We do look at the report, we do read the numbers, we ensure that they tie back to the financial statements, but we, and if there were any material inconsistencies, we will come back and let management know about it, but we did not find any inconsistencies between the information that was presented in those supplementary information or other information and the basic financial statements. And then this slide talks about a couple of new GASBs that are coming up. As you can see, we are now to 101, and this is more forward-looking. This does not apply till 2025, FY 2025 year, and we are already in conversation with management about how to apply some of these GASBs and how that would change the financial statements. So with that, end of my presentation. Once again, I would like to thank Susan and her team for having a successful audit, and open for any questions that the council members have.
Thank you for that robust presentation. Do we have any questions from City Council?
Yes, I have one question. You mentioned you compare across different localities. Do you have anything published specifically like that that might highlight a few things that so we could see potentially what other localities are doing?
No, we don't compile that information for, no. Short answer is no, but we have internal, because our team looks at so much information, and most localities have about the same kind of information. Like the OPEB liability, the pension liability. Every locality has that liability. So the discount rate that goes in might be a little bit off from each other, but they are consistently across the board around the same number. So we would see the general trend if everybody's going down and the city of Newport News is going up with that discount rate, then we would start asking questions. But we look at generally those kinds of things across the localities for that particular purpose.
Yeah, and I'm just curious, Susan, if this, at the state level, do we have something? Okay.
State level, you're exactly right. So the Auditor of Public Accounts we have to submit this information in, a giant Excel file from the ACFR. They get that from all the localities. It's required by December 15th. So if you go to the APA's website, you can see a comparative report of localities. They also have a fiscal distress report, and localities that are in fiscal distress show up on that. But they apply the same measuring tools for everyone, so you can kind of look across the board and see how we stack up against the others. So that's on the Virginia Auditor of Public Accounts.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you both.
Any further questions?
I just had one question. If you're looking at the report, and that is really a great honor and shows the hard work to not have any findings. But I didn't know if you printed in here, what is the time of the audit? Like, is this a week? Are you coming in and working with Susan and her team for a week or a month? Or is it throughout the year? What's the time frame?
So the audit usually starts in May. So we do a planning where we do a risk assessment of the city based on the preliminary numbers. But we actually do the field work part of it come August, September. So we take a break in between, come back. So in total, 3-4 months of work, but it includes lots of testing, lots of questions, lots of assistance from Susan and her team. So we would look between the federal awards, we would look at probably 200, 300, 400 samples. So documenting all of that, pulling samples for all of that does take time in there. And again, that's just on single audit, the financial statement side. There's different protocols and different things to look at. So I would say in aggregate, it does take, it's a mountain to move, sure, with all these transactions that are happening. But yeah, it's about 3 to 4 months of total time. But we definitely talk to the finance department on a yearly basis. It's just not doing the audit. So that is additional time that we are talking about various new things that are coming up. How does that impact the city's financial statements, or anything that Susan and her team would like to talk about, and any unusual transaction that comes up.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Hearing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, we have comments, ideas, suggestions. I want to turn it over to Councilman Neely.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, Council, I was wondering if we could have the Friday off before Christmas for all city staff, if that would be possible. Mr. Mayor, Mr. City Manager.
I will turn it over to Mr. Archer.
Yes, Councilman Neely, thank you for the request. And we've had an opportunity to look into your inquiry, and under revisions that were made some time ago, the city manager has the authority to grant additional holidays. And so at this time, I'm pleased to support your request for one additional city holiday to occur at Christmas, specifically on Friday, December the 22nd.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Councilman Neely, for putting that to the body. We appreciate that. We'll just continue going to my left to right. Councilman Harris.
I don't have anything.
I'm sorry, Councilman Neely. Were you done?
Yes, that's
Okay.
all, Mr.
Yeah.
I don't have anything for that.
Okay.
I don't have anything, Mr. Mayor.
No comment.
All right, it's a quick day. I just want to say thank you for all of the staff and support to have it in Uptown. I know there's a lot of mics and a lot of AV, but I think this helps us be transparent, especially when you have to drive 25 minutes downtown. So those are my comments. I know, Alan, do you have anything?
No, sir.
Oh,
sorry, I do want to say something.
Yeah.
If we do, and I think it's so important that we have council meetings other than downtown. But I would like for us to consider if there are people who regularly come, and there are people downtown who regularly come, if we could provide a bus of some kind for anyone who would really like to attend the meeting, if it is in another part of the town, if they could be at a bus stop down there at a certain time and be bused to wherever the meeting is being held, so they are not denied. I know they could get on television, but many of them like to come in person. If there could be a bus that would be available to bring them to the council meeting if they really want to be there, and you could have them sign up ahead of time and find that out. So I just would like to make a suggestion that so they would not be excluded, and I think that we always want to be transparent and we want to be inclusive. So something to consider.
That would apply to any part of town. I mean, that would apply to any part of town, transportation. So I don't know how
I
that
know,
would
but
work.
it's normally in downtown, is what I'm saying. The normal setting for it has always been downtown. So if there are people who really feel strongly about being there, I was wondering if we could make that happen for them.
Yeah, we'll take a look at it. If we don't have anything else, we stand adjourned. Thank you.